but like I feel like I'm gonna fly through this series in no time, and I'm so excited for it. So my favorite moment in this book is between Pip and Robbie, and what I liked about it, let me tell you what it is first, Kelsey. It took me a little bit longer to read this, not because I wasn't interested in it, but because of just like, this took a little bit longer for me to get through, and not because I wasn't, there's a hair and it's driving me bonkers, hold on. And then there's these chalk figures that don't have heads, that are so faint on, bless you, bless you. Hello everybody, my name is Kelsey, and we're about to get very, very nerdy with another hyped series. So I am adding another episode to the Hyped Books Chronicles that I have started. In the past, we've done one singular book, we've done part of a series, and today we are finally doing what like the whole purpose of this series was, which is to read a complete series and tell you my thoughts on them. So today we are doing a trilogy. You probably already know from the title and everything, but it is the Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson trilogy. Now, I have all three books out from the library, and I've actually already started the first one. So I will tell you my thoughts in a second. But the first one is A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. The second one is Good Girls Bad Blood. And then the third one is As Good as Dead. I think there might be a prequel, but I haven't investigated that, so we might try that in this video as well. But the purpose of this video is to do these main three. I just had this urge, you know, like out of nowhere, it feels like I had this urge to pick up the series. It's kind of been on my radar for a while. I haven't really thought twice about it, but I know that at least the first book in the series has been turned into a Netflix series. And I stumbled upon it on Netflix when I was just like scrolling through stuff, and I just kind of was reminded that this series was a thing, and I was like, you know what, that would be a good thing to read during the fall time. And so here we are, reading the entire series. I'm so excited. So I do have the audiobooks for all of these, which I'm very excited about now that I've started the first one, because there is mixed media elements. This is kind of like a collection, at least so far this feels like a case file almost. So there are multiple narrators. It's a full cast recording with some audio, like some sound effects and things like that, and I'm very much enjoying it. What I am going to do in this series is, everything is kind of spoilery, so we're definitely going to spoil the first one. I haven't decided if we're going to spoil 2 and 3 as I go through them. We probably will, but as of right now, we're definitely going to spoil the first one. So here's your warning, it's spoilery. So in this book, at least the first one, we follow our main character Pip, who is doing a research project for school. I think she's a senior this year, if I'm correct. I don't remember. She lives in this town where there was a girl named Andy that was murdered. I think it's been 5 years. And so she sees how this tragedy has haunted her town. So Andy ends up going missing, and no one can find her. They still haven't found her body, but they suspect that she has been killed. And there is a boy named Sal, who was her boyfriend at the time, who it looks like committed suicide after admitting to killing her. So everyone in the town thinks, obviously, this boy did it, and he killed himself out of guilt. So Pip is suspicious about all of this. So she's using this kind of like senior project almost. It's kind of like a thesis project, where she is presenting it as like a, how did media handle the situation? But it all starts with her going to the house and talking to the brother of Sal, Robbie. And they kind of strike up a conversation, and she then starts to like investigate a bunch of people randomly about things. People who think that Sal did it, people who don't think that Sal did it, Andy's best friends, Sal's best friends, Andy's family, if she can get in touch with them, people in the media, people in the police department, just anything that she can to kind of like pinpoint some stuff that's going on, because there's some like things in the case that do not add up for her. And then after she does some digging and finding a couple of things, Robbie comes around and says, I'll make you a deal, I'll help you out, and I think you can find things that I can't find because people see me as the brother of the killer and you are far removed from it. So I think you can help me solve this because I don't think my brother did it. So it's really the two of them investigating what's going on. It's like a lot of recordings. Like I said, there is some transcripts in here. She has reached out to like lots of friends, things like that. So I started it today just because I was like, you know what? I finished the other book I was reading. I need to start this series. Let's go ahead and do it. So I did, and I've made it 158 pages into this book. So we're not quite halfway, but we are really, really close. And honestly, I can see myself finishing this tomorrow. I am hooked right away. The character of Pip is really fascinating because I think she has a very removed look at the story and she doesn't think Sal did it, but she can see where, like, in some of the testimonies that he gave police, she's like, oh, that was suspicious. So, like, if it turns out that he is the one who did it, she can accept that, I guess. She kind of, I don't know how to explain it. She's not super, super connected to it like Robbie is. So I was hooked right away. It starts, literally the first thing in this book is a piece of paper that like outlines her proposal, and then the first chapter is literally her walking up to the house and talking to Robbie, and she just like is able to do things and find out information that like other people can't find, and she is willing to go to different parts. Like she reaches out to a journalist who is very much believes that Sal did it, and so she's got this list of suspects, and like I just am so hooked. I love the way it's written. I love the way this is presented, kind of like this is the case file where like she is putting like her thoughts into this log. And so like, yes, you do get bits of narration where like it's in third person and we're watching Pip, but like, I don't know, it's done really, really well. And I am enjoying having the audiobook as well because of this full cast recording. It makes it more immersive. And anything with a full cast recording, I am all over. So I love this. I don't know where we're gonna go. Like, it's definitely dangerous. She's already had some death threats. Maybe not death threats. She's had a threat. She went camping with her friends and she thought she saw someone in the woods and came back, and there was a note in her sleeping bag. Is that what it's called? Yeah. And it was like basically Pip, stop investigating. And she's like, I've struck a nerve somewhere. And so there's a very clear person who looks like is the front runner of who did it, which means of course this person didn't do it. And so I'm like, it's going to be like someone we don't suspect, like the best friend, or like, is she an unreliable narrator? Did she do it? Like, that's where my brain is at. But like, why would she be investigating if it was her? So like, I don't think it is, but like, you know, my brain goes to all of these different directions. So I'm just really enjoying the story, watching it, how it's unfolding. I don't know how this can be turned into a series. The fact that there are 2 more books makes me nervous and excited all at the same time. So like, if the other 2 go the way of this one, I am so hooked. I am so invested. So honestly, I'll probably come back to you when I finish this because of where my brain is at and like how fast I flew through this and the amount of driving I have to do to get to work. Like, I'm gonna fly through this. Plus I have my audiobook on like at least 1.8 speed. But like, I feel like I'm gonna fly through this series in no time, and I'm so excited for it. So this is a very, very promising start. Again, the fact that I was able to read 150 something pages in one day, amazing. Great. I mean, yes, it was via audiobook, but still, like, I am hooked. I'll let you know as I continue, but like, this is going so well. Peanut has thoughts. Last night I finished A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson, and I gave this book 5 stars. It was so good. Okay, I'm a little all over the place here. Don't know what I was thinking when I went into this. Like, I didn't go into this thinking it was not going to be good. I didn't go in thinking like it was going to be the best thing ever. I didn't really have any opinions, I guess, going in. So I didn't have anything to compare my final thoughts to. I loved this book. I loved the twists and turns. I loved that we got a reveal and then we got another reveal. Like, the person who we thought killed Andy was not the person who killed Andy. It was, but it wasn't. And then we got a second reveal. Like, it was a whole thing. And then I just was on the edge of my seat the entire time I was reading. I could not put this book down. Like, I had things to do, and I was sitting here going, I need to know what's going on. So, like, I was wholeheartedly invested in this book. What I liked about this book is that, well, a couple of things. Like I said, there was a twist, and then there was a second twist. Like, we found out it was one person, and then we actually found out it was a second person. And I thought it would have been funny this whole time if Andy was alive. Not gonna lie, the fact that, like, she just seemed like someone who would just up and disappear and make people think that she died. But at the same time, I didn't actually think that was the case, because then Sal died, you know? So, like, it wasn't just she died and Sal was imprisoned. It was like she died, then Sal died. And so I thought that would have been the most fascinating reason, I guess, at the end that she went missing, but I didn't think it was likely because of Sal. And then we get to the end where we find Mr. Ward in this house with someone who we think is Andy, and then it turns out to not be Andy. That was my favorite plot twist, was the fact that, like, even he thought it was somebody, but, like, Pip was like, that, something's wrong here. And so I just thought that was interesting, because this man was taking care of someone for 5 years, and it's not even the person he thought it was. I mean, that must have messed him up when he found out. Like, he was such in a state of shock that he just assumed any blonde girl was Andy. And, you know, she was really skinny and, like, apparently had been on drugs. So, like, you could convince yourself that this person is similar, but is it really that person? Like, what must his brain have been thinking, you know, like, when that was revealed? That must have been insane. And then I kind of always figured the sister was in on something. Like, she was super innocent, and the first time that Pip talked to her, I was like, something else is going on here. And, like, I didn't like her. I'm glad it's not the father. Like, he's the most obvious suspect, and he was the one that I was, like, the most, like, oh, it's him. And then at the same time, the character of Max, who's, like, that friend who had the Facebook page and was, I don't know how to explain it, like, he was a friend of Sal's, but, like, he wasn't. He, like, did some messed up things. The fact that, like, he was guilty, but not of what we thought he was. The fact that this murder mystery, like, that Pip and Ravi did, like, this deep dive investigation, ended with 4 people arrested. That's crazy to me. But it totally makes sense. Like, there was just so much, and there were still things that didn't get answered. Like, there's a couple of characters, like a reporter and a police officer who was on the force at the time, and the reporter who was reporting it at the time, and they clearly knew each other, but, like, we never figured out why or what that situation was about. So, like, is that going to come back up in later books? I don't know. But, like, there's even some things that weren't answered, which I found interesting, because, like, that seems very realistic. You get the answers you want, but all these other things, you may never find out what happened, you know? So I liked that. I should tell you trigger warnings. Obviously murder. Duh. But there is lots of talk of, obviously, suicide and self-harm, because, like, Sal was supposed to have killed himself. So, like, that's a big conversation. Pet death is a huge part of the plot. So, like, if you are someone who that affects, that's a big part of the plot at the end. I thought that drug abuse, sexual assault, I think that might be it. So my favorite moment in this book, I think, is this moment between Pip and Ravi near the end, where, like, Pip has been told by this person that has been basically threatening her to stop, that they took her dog, and that if she destroys all of her research and everything, they'll give the dog back. And so what she does when she destroys everything is she basically tries to burn every bridge with Ravi as well, and he just kind of, like, accepts it and storms off. And I was so worried that we were going to have this, like, moment that I mean, it's a YA mystery. It's very easy in YA books, and I discovered them more in YA books and other books, is that people don't talk about the problems, and that's what causes a lot of conflict. And you could so easily have a moment where like Ravi just is angry at her because she's giving up on his brother's investigation and never speaks to her again. But the next day he comes back and says, I've thought about this and I know you very well. I know why you're not talking to me. And I think if a lot of people in books thought about the person they were talking to and really like thought about who they were as a character and as a person, then they would see that like the things they're doing are like self-destruction because they're trying to protect somebody. And clearly Ravi is like, oh, you are so headstrong about this. You wouldn't just switch on a dime without a reason. Let me think about what the reason is. And so he comes back and is like, I figured it out. So the fact that he like doesn't give up on her and he thinks logically about the situation, I loved, because you could so easily just like let them be angry at each other. And I like that he doesn't. So I'm emotionally invested in these characters, but I'm so interested to see like, this feels like a one and done situation. I mean, clearly it's not. There's 2 more books. I even found the prequel audiobook at my library. So I will be sticking that one in at the very end as well. But like, this felt like a one and done situation. But the next one is Good Girl, Bad Blood. And I have checked out the synopsis. So I know the general plot, which is that like, it's now 6 years since Andy and Sal were murdered. And they hold a memorial for them, and someone goes missing at this memorial, and Pip and Ravi try to figure it out. And so the fact that like, also they like have turned this first story of Andy and Sal into a podcast. Of course they have. I mean, there's so many true crime podcasts, like it makes sense. So like Pip is like, this is a one and done situation. I'm just now realizing that one of these headphones is busted. That's not part of the point. Anyway, but like, she's like, it's one and done. I'm done. I'm happy. Like, we're good. And things happen. So like, I don't know. We're going to learn some more stuff. Is it connected? Is it not? I'm fascinated. One of the things about this that I found was really interesting was like that it's marketed as a thriller, but I would consider it more of a mystery. Yes, there's suspense. I mean, they get themselves in these really stressful situations. They talk to people who like don't like them. There's a lot of confrontation. They break into some houses. She's getting threats from people, both on her phone and in like physical paper. And that's stressful and suspenseful. So that's like, you know, you're on the edge of your seat. But like, it's really just these 2 people, Pip and Ravi, solving a mystery. So it's mostly just them sitting down, looking at all the conversations and stuff that they've happened and collecting facts. Like, it's nothing that's like too crazy. So again, more of a mystery than a thriller. This one, I'm wondering if it's going to be more of a thriller than a mystery, just based on how much like she does not want to be part of this. And so I'm interested to see if it's going to be the same vibe of like they're just fact finding, but like there is some suspense, but it's again more of a mystery than a thriller. We'll see. And then I have no idea about the last one. I haven't read the synopsis of it yet on purpose because I want to read the second one. So I'm hoping to start this one today. We'll see. It's pretty late. I am looking here, and of course it's got like different, you know, there's the same kind of mixed media elements. So I know this one's also a full cast recording, which I'm very excited about. I'm enjoying this full cast recording. And so like, I know that there are elements in here, like there are sections like this that are like snippets from like their podcast. And there's other like stuff in here. I just saw like a document, like a picture and stuff. So like, it's definitely, there's an article, a mixed media book. It's mostly written in verse. Oh, there's a map. How very exciting. There's just some stuff going on. So I'm very interested. There's text messages in here. So I like the mixed media elements. I love the full cast recording elements. I'm excited to see how this is going to be different, because again, there's a podcast element to this one that wasn't in the first book. Although we did have like audio recordings because she like records her phone conversations with people. So like you get the audio recording, but like in here it's the transcript. So I'm interested to see what new elements we're going to have in this book that we didn't have in the past one. That is a sketch from a trial. Fascinating. Okay, like I'm just like, here's the thing, okay? I'm all over the place. Here's the thing. I'm super nervous about going into this one because I loved the first one so much, but it felt like a one and done. So like, even though I know what this one's about, I am hesitant because like, could this just be like another good mystery? Or is this pandering to an audience? You know, I'm thinking because there's 3, It's not the pandering thing, but I am hesitantly optimistic going into this one. I don't know. I'm excited. I think it's going to be good because the first one was so good. So I don't know how much I'm going to read over this weekend. I'm probably going to be able to read a bunch next week with commutes and stuff. But I have other things that I'm doing this weekend instead. So I'll let you know when I've started this. Hopefully I'll get halfway soon. I'm excited. This series was a good one to do. Hello. It has been a few days. We're actually at my in-laws this week because it makes driving to work easier, and also there's more people to look after the daughter. That's beside the point. I'm trying to put my bracelet on while I talk to you, and it's not really working. So I have made it about halfway. I think I looked online and it said, or on Goodreads, and it said I was at like 45-ish% of Good Girl Bad Blood, and I'm loving it. I think it's really interesting because it's the same exact vibes as the first one, in the sense of like there's a mystery going on, except for this mystery is a missing person rather than a murder like the first book. So in this book, Pip has like basically taken all of her recordings and everything and gotten everyone's approval for it and put it in a podcast form, and she and Robbie have like basically put all of their details and investigation out there just so like people have it and like the police can see it. Like I think she probably handed it over, that information, but like they've made it into a podcast and it became really popular. And because of how it ended with her like almost dying and getting drugged and having to have her stomach pumped and like all this stuff at the very end, she's like, I'm done. We're not doing this anymore. And so that makes obviously her parents and everyone very happy. And then one of her really good friends, because there's a core group of 3 girls and 3 guys that like we kind of meet in the first book. And one of these guys is named Connor, and his brother Jamie goes missing after a memorial for Andy and Sal from the first book. It's been 6 years since they died, and so there was like a little bit of a memorial, and she sees him there, and that's the last time anyone sees him. And so Connor comes to her and is like, the police won't do anything because he's like, I think 25, and so he's like, he's over the age of 18, so they're not going to do anything. They won't touch it for the first 48 hours. I think something's wrong. Mom thinks something is wrong. Please, we look into it. And her first instinct is to say, no, I'm not going to do that. Like, I'm done with this, but I'll go to the police because I have got a good rapport with the police. And the police do nothing. And so she goes, all right, fine, you know what, I'll do it. So she kind of starts investigating with Robbie, and Connor's along for the ride. And they are figuring out what happened to Jamie. And then they are putting out podcast episodes in the hopes of like, if he has just run away, then he'll come back, which they don't think is likely. I don't think is likely either. Or if someone knows something, then this will get people talking about it and get people kind of noticing, oh, you know what, I actually did see that guy. And it has worked. They've gotten at least a couple of people have come forward being like, you know, we actually did see him that night. Didn't think anything of it, but now that I know he's missing, here's where we saw him and here's the timeline. So like I said, halfway through, I'm on chapter 19, 184 pages. And it's just like the first one in vibes, in the sense of like, it's a mystery versus a thriller. I mean, there's thriller elements, I think, because, I mean, not really yet in this book, but I assume there will be thriller elements just based on how the first one went with like suspense and at the very end when she's figuring stuff out. But right now it's just them collecting information. There's also a trial going on because one of the 4 people who got arrested at the end of last book was a guy named Max. And he got arrested for basically roofing drinks at parties. And it caused a lot of issues. And so he's on trial, and we just found out that like he was at the memorial and he just like randomly showed up. So like I think he's going to play a bigger part. Like he basically hasn't played a part yet. He just kind of like showed up, but I think he's going to play a bigger part. There's a catfishing plot line, if you will, following Jamie, and like I said, halfway through, so like there's so much more that could happen, but it's interesting having the different elements because like this time around there's case notes instead of like, it's the same thing, but like in the first book it was like the files that she created for her project. Like it was like her writing things out. And this one is case notes. There's still audio recordings, but like she has to be very careful and get everyone's approval because it's going to go on a podcast. Whereas before she was just recording. I mean, she would get people's approval, but like she would just record for her own benefit. And then she had to go get like release forms from everybody, and not everyone signed a release form. So like this Max guy, she has audio proof of him agreeing that he roofied drinks, and she can't use it because he didn't sign a form. So I suspect I will finish this in the next day or two, honestly. But I'm loving it just as much as the first one. Like I'm hooked just as much as the first one. I love the characters. I feel like we're expanding on the world more in this one, which is interesting. It's also really interesting to see because like one of the bad guys at the end of the first book, I mean, I would say like there's two main bad guys and then two that just kind of got arrested and caught in the crossfire. And one of the main bad guys is the father of one of Pip's best friends. And so we see her name's Kara, we see her kind of like dealing with the fact that her dad's now in jail. And there's some stuff going on with that. And so it's interesting to see just like all these characters that were, I won't say one-dimensional in the first book because they weren't, but they were more one-dimensional than 3D, let's say. And so it's interesting to see them kind of have personalities in this one. Anyway, fascinating. I'm loving it. I will come back to you when I have finished, but I mean, the way that these stories are being told has me hooked. Hello. So I'm here in this terrible lighting to give you updates because I have finished Good Girl, Bad Blood and I have started As Good as Dead. So I ended up giving this one 5 stars, just like the first one. I have a lot of the same feelings about like the general mystery of it. It was more of a mystery than a thriller, I would say, until we got to the very end. Then it went into like thriller territory, but like I was on the edge of my seat. It took me a little bit longer to get through, not because I wasn't interested in it, just because like life stuff, like I didn't have a lot of time to read like I did with the first one. So it took me a little bit longer to get through, but I still, like when I was reading, I was hooked. This felt less mixed media to me. I mean, it had its mixed media elements, don't get me wrong. It's about, you know, a missing kid and a podcast. So like there's going to be media elements to it. There's going to be a full cast recording. There's a couple other pieces here and there throughout the book, but it's a little bit less than the first one. And so far I'm only 70 pages into the third book, and this one is definitely even less than the second one. So that's a little sadness for me just because I loved how mixed it all was, and I liked seeing the full cast recording and everything like that. Like that was really fun, and those elements are still part of the plot. They just, I feel like, were less in this one. So as I said, gave it 5 stars. A lot of the same feelings as the first one, like I've already said, but like the ending threw me for a loop. I mean, I expected the ending, but I also didn't expect the ending. So you've got her trying to figure out what happened to Jamie, and throughout the way, like there was a body found at one point and they thought it was Jamie's body. It turns out it wasn't. Spoiler, obviously, because this whole video is a spoiler. He's fine. They find him at the end, and it's been a rough situation, but like he gets it figured out. And honestly, if Pip and Robbie and Connor hadn't of lured one person to where they thought he was and figured it out, then, you know, the ending, some of the stuff in the ending wouldn't have happened. But like Jamie's fine. He got kidnapped by the guy, Stanley, who was the reporter from the first one. He was trying to make amends throughout this one because he was so against Robbie. Sorry, not Robbie. He was so against Sal and thought that Sal was the one who did it. Like he was very, very like verbal in his reporting and thinking that Sal did it. And so he feels really bad. So he's doing everything he can to help Pip out. Well, he is actually in witness protection, and he is the son of like a serial killer who kidnapped young kids. I'm not sure if they were all girls, but they were definitely like young kids. And he was the one who lured them away because like his dad basically forced him to help. So he was another kid who was trustworthy, so they went with him. He hates where he came from. He thinks he can't really be redeemed, I guess is the best word, even though like he was quite literally forced by his father as a child to do these things. So it wasn't like he really had a choice. I mean, this person who has taught you and raised you, you think is going to be there for you, and then like makes you do these things. I'm with Pip and thinking that he just had a really tough upbringing. But there's this new family in the town, Charlie and Fiona, who rented a house down the street from Pip, who like helped them out a little bit with a case here and there. And he actually is the twin of one of the kids that Stanley, it's not a real name, but Stanley's father killed. And Stanley helped lure away. So he's been trying to find him, and he's posing as this, well, and he goes to different towns, but he was posing as this woman looking for men who looked kind of similar to Jamie, with the like blonde hair and like the way that like physique, but that were either about to turn 30 or had just turned 30. And in this situation, basically being catfished, they used a woman or a girl from the town, someone who lived in the town, and like doctored her photos to be a little bit older. Jamie really fell for this person, and so he was trying to help any way that he can. He had lied about his age, that's why they were interested in him to begin with. Then he came clean that he was actually younger, and so they didn't have any reason for him. Either way, he ends up being kidnapped by Stanley, because Stanley thought that he was out to get him, which he was, but then they had a talk, they figured it out, and he was letting him go, and they had like made a deal. And then Pip and Robbie show up. And so because of that, they have lured Stanley there, because they had figured out that Stanley is this kid. And because of that, Charlie shows up and shoots Stanley 6 times, I might add. Like that was an exaggeration. He was fine after like 2. Like he was not coming back from that, and this guy insisted on shooting him 6 times. So all the same trigger warnings from the first one I think apply here, but you've also got PTSD, because like at the very, very end, she's like, after she's there, because she's literally there watching Stanley get shot. And so then like she kind of like has this moment of like she's kind of out of herself, and it was really interesting having her describe what it was like, because like I don't know if you can tell, but there's like all these random spaces, and like the way that her brain is working is it's very lagging, and she's kind of spacing out. And so she's explaining that she's gone to the police. The police have come and figured everything out, and she's given the statement and everything like that, and she's very like out of it while she's doing that. So it's very like, almost felt like a panic attack on the page is the best way that I could describe it. And then of course, like she has reverbs from that of like any loud noise she thinks is a gunshot, and it's kind of like freaking her out. And so that plays a part in the end of this, and then it plays a huge part in the third one. So I didn't expect the ending in the sense of, I didn't expect the ending because it was so brutal so fast. And she literally like had this man die in her arms. So that was surprising in the sense of like the brutality of it. I didn't see it coming. It was this like serial killer cold case kind of situation that was thrown on top of a present one. So I didn't expect that. I expected someone was going to die at the end of this. I just felt like that was going to happen. I didn't expect the way it was going to be. I honestly thought they were going to find Jamie dead. I'm so glad that they didn't. I'm glad that Jamie was fine and figured everything out, and he came back and he's good now. But I was surprised by the twist of the kind of like whodunit, if you will. There's not really a whodunit, but a whodunit. And so I was on the edge of my seat. This one took all the characters that I have known and loved and like expanded them tenfold, which was really fun to see, and also watch her take on another case that she really doesn't want to do. Like she's like done. I'm like, she's content with her one and done situation. It took her down a rabbit hole. She doesn't need to go down that anymore. And then her friend's brother goes missing, and he and his mom are like begging her to do stuff for him. So that's what that one's all about. I loved it. I thought it was great. The third one, which I've started, I mentioned, I'm nervous about because of a couple of things. And mainly it's because I'm an idiot and I went down the rabbit hole. And when I went to look at what this one was about, I saw some Goodreads reviews, and people didn't mark some of the things as spoilery. So there's a couple of things in this book. I've read someone say there was a cliffhanger. It's the finale that makes me nervous. I don't like a finale with a cliffhanger. I also know that like a relationship in here that I love, I was told that Pip and Robbie break up, which I am sad about, but based on where she is mentally when the beginning of this book starts, honestly makes sense. And that's a spoiler that I'm okay knowing going in. Like if I am wholeheartedly invested in a couple and they're not endgame, I'm glad that I know. So that might change as we get farther into it, but I'm glad I know that now. And then, like I said, because of the events of the second one and how it ends with like that brutal scene and all the gunshots, she has a lot of PTSD from that. So she finds out in the last book that this character named Nat DeSilva, which I've not mentioned once, but she was in the first one as a suspect. She was clean. She's one of Jamie's best friends. Actually, Jamie has a really big crush on her, and she doesn't want to help Pip, but then eventually she does help Pip. And so she was one of the girls that the character of Max attacked in the last book, or not in the last book, but like it came out in the last book. And so he's on trial for drugging and raping multiple women, and she was one of them. And so she's not in a happy place. So in this book, she has a boyfriend named Luke, and Luke is a drug dealer. And so he comes and talks to her. Pip and Robbie force him to talk. And so we kind of learn about him as a character. Throughout this book, we also discover that Max's case, the jury found him not guilty. And she decided to post the audio clip that she had of him admitting to drugging these women anyway. And so this book starts with a defamation case between her and Max. So you've got that. And Max's lawyer is basically like, we'll drop all of the charges and we'll drop the fee to just like $5,000, which is still ridiculous, if she goes on her social media and recants that this was a doctored audio and this actually wasn't Max and that she was sorry. And she's like, over my dead body, I'm never doing that. So that's probably going to go to court and that's going to be interesting. So you've got that situation, and Max is an absolute jerk. So you've got that, plus the fact that like she has been taking Adderall and she's been buying them from this Luke character because she can't sleep at night because she just keeps hearing the gunshot over and over and over and over in her head. Gunshots, I guess I should say. And so she just cannot live and sleep, and like nothing she does is helping except for these pills. And so she does like know that she needs to stop, and so there's like that situation, but she's basically putting on this perfect persona for everyone in her life. So she's like trying to be this perfect person, and it's the summer before she goes to college. She's going to Columbia, and she thinks that the last two cases that she had were very gray. There was no right or wrong. She felt for multiple sides, like the bad guy, her best friend's father, who was guilty in the first book, was mostly by accident. So like she feels bad for that. That wasn't like a cut and dry case. The characters in this one, I mean, Stanley dies, but she thinks that Stanley, you know, was in a bad situation because of his dad. But then she also understands why Charlie does what he does and searches at the man and the kid who killed his sister, because like she would do the same thing for her brother. So she's got a lot of like gray area so she decides that she's going to find this Jane Doe. This case is very cut and dry. There's a bad guy. He's a serial killer. There's no gray area. Once she solves that, then she's good and she's done, and that'll solve everything. She keeps getting these messages both on Twitter and on like the comments and her social posts, and some stuff is like appearing at her house, like birds without heads or pigeons without heads and things like that. And the comment is, who will look for you when you're the one who disappears? So it sounds like there's somebody who's going to be after her. So this one feels like the darkest so far. Again, there's like a heavy cloud of PTSD all over this because she's dealing with her feelings and her thoughts based on what happened in the last book. But just based on where we're going, I'm genuinely scared of how this is going to go because it's dark so far. Like I said, I'm only 70 pages in, so I'll probably have thoughts. It's written in 2 parts, and I've read some opinions that said like you should start with part 1 and just make up your own ending, and that scares me. So, you know, I'm really nervous going into this one because I've read some not so great reviews of people who loved the last couple of books, but I'm reading them back to back to back, so I'm not giving myself any time between them, and that usually causes the problems when I read series. So I'm hoping this one will still be good for me. but I'm nervous. Those are my thoughts kind of going in. Like I said, I've just barely started it, so I'll probably come back to you maybe when I've reached halfway, maybe when I finish it. It kind of just depends on how my reading goes, but I'm thinking maybe halfway, maybe once I'm done with part 1. But it's dark, so she's stressing me out. Honestly, that's where we're at. Is like the book itself, the story itself, nothing's really happening yet, but she as a person is stressing me out. Hi. So it's been many a day. I am here to basically give you a final update because I finished both As Good as Dead, as well as the novella Killjoy. And it's been a few days since I've even finished those. So I just haven't had time to talk to you about them. So here I am. I ended up giving this one 4.5 stars because okay, so the end of part 1, right? I should have come to you at the end of it, but I was like in the middle of reading and I could not stop because the end of part 1 has that like ridiculously big plot twist in the sense of like Pip goes from investigating murders to committing one. Excuse me? Did he deserve it? Yes, I think so. But it's like that was such a dramatic twist of character for her that I did not see it coming. I thought she was just gonna do something to like make him pay in the courts and like fine. I don't know. The plot of this one, I told you a little bit about it at the beginning, where she thinks she just needs this final case to solidify everything and then she'll be fine. Well, she ends up getting all of these like weird messages, which I think I mentioned. They all say who will look for you when you're the one who disappears, and she's kind of in her head about that. Then she's got these chalk figures that are drawn outside her house that are so faint that even like the rain, a car going over them, someone walking over them too quickly could go away. But they're headless stick figures, and there's 5 of them, and each time she sees them, they're closer and closer to her house, and then they start climbing up to her window, which means the person who is doing them knows which window is hers. And then she keeps finding pigeons on her doorstep. And of course, all these things can be explained, like the pigeons could be someone's cat. The figures disappear before she can really ever take a picture. She does finally get a picture of them, plus Ravi is with her at one point when she sees them, but like she doesn't have all this evidence, and so no one believes her, especially since she's gone through this horrific like event at the end of the last book where she literally had someone die in her arms. So she's like going through a lot, and so like the guy at the police station doesn't believe her. And then she kind of goes down the rabbit hole because there's this guy called the duct tape killer, and he would bind his victims in duct tape. There's 5 of them, and this guy got put away in prison for it, and his mom doesn't think that he's the one who did it because like she's listened to the testimony, and it was like one of those like they grilled him all night long and he was exhausted, and so he started thinking that maybe he had done it, and so like the police officer is like feeding him the facts, and so it's very clearly a coerced confession. And so she's like, well, the mom just probably is thinking it's my son, he can't do that. But then she like listens and reads the I think she just reads the transcripts of the investigation or of that confession, and she goes, yeah, this guy was clearly coerced. And so then she goes down the rabbit hole and try to figure out that she thinks that the DT is what she calls it, the duct tape killer, is after her. And so something happened at the time that Billy, which is the guy who went to jail for it, when he went to jail, they stopped. So of course everyone's like, well, clearly he's the one who is the duct tape killer because like the murders stopped. But the last murder took place on the same night that Andy Bell died, which is what started this whole series. So what I liked about the series is it went full circle. Like we came back to things in the first book that didn't make sense, and now they make sense. And then also like one of the victims' sisters mentioned in an article that like her sister, like a week before she went missing and then ended up dead, we talked about pigeons and chalk figures, and that she got prank calls, and all these things are happening to Pip. And so Pip is like, this guy's after her, and she figured out like a way to figure out who it is. And then she finds this email address that Andy Bell had because she thinks like she knows. She's been contacting this woman, and like they became friends, and it turns out that Andy Bell like figured out who the duct tape killer was, and like they were very, very close to her. And I think it was very clear who the duct tape killer was after reading that email from Andy. Like, I feel like it very clearly pointed to one direction and one direction only, whereas Pip and Robbie went into a different direction. And I was like, why are you going over there? It's clearly this guy. And it was. I was right. So, like, that one was the only, like, reveal, I guess you could say, that I guessed in that series. But, like, she gets kidnapped really early on, and then, you know, the end of the first part is her killing this guy, and then the second part is her and Robbie covering it up. And so while the first part took place over weeks, the second part really took place over one night. It was such a dramatic end to part one that I couldn't stop reading and come tell you about it. It's basically what I'm saying. I think this was a very drastic character change for Pip, because she's the person who, like, dives deep in the investigations and figures things out, and she just knows things, and then all of a sudden now she's the one trying to cover up something. And I get where she's coming from, because she was like, it was not self-defense, and also, like, she's already going through basically the police and what they're going to say about her, because they don't believe her. And they didn't believe her when she came to them and said, hey, I was being stalked. They're like, you don't have any proof of this. Sorry about it. Maybe, I mean, he didn't say it, but he basically said, like, maybe it's just in your head. And so for a while, she, like, thought that herself before she went to the police. It's a whole thing. Anyway, so because there's a drastic change, and also, like, at the beginning of part one, until she really started diving into the investigation, we are in Pip's head a lot, which makes sense. I mean, she's the main character. She's who we're following. She drove me nuts. Like, half the time, I was like, just go talk to someone. Not like the normal YA talk about your feelings thing that you get between couples. Like, literally go find a therapist. Like, you have stuff that you have not worked through, and you're just putting on a persona to make everyone else happy so that they won't question whether or not you are content, because that's what you think everyone wants from you. So she did have a major, like, life thing happen. So I get that her character changed a little bit. It just felt like she annoyed me a lot of the time, because she just kept, like, harping on the same stuff over and over and over. And I was like, dude, you clearly aren't okay. Stop pretending like you are. And so really what the problem was that she thought she could solve it herself without anybody's help. And so she can't do that. And then the second part I did find really interesting, because, like, even though I didn't agree that that's what Pip's character would do, at the same time, it made sense. And also, like, seeing all these people that she's created, like, her little friend group. Like, she has some friends from the beginning. Like, they had, like, this friend group of 3 girls and 3 guys. And she's only friends with one of the guys and one of the girls. 2 of the guys? No, because one moves away. So, like, those 2 are still her really close friends, especially one of them's her best friend, so she's been there. Her dad was the killer in the first book. The second one is Connor, whose brother disappeared in the second book, and she helped out, whereas the other 2 in the group are now dating each other, and they think that everyone made it up. And so, like, they're jerks, and, like, I can't stand them. And then, of course, you've added people throughout this book, and so you see people, they're coming to her, like, she's coming to them because, like, they've been there for her. And they don't need the details, but they know, like, something's going on, and they're going to do whatever they can to help out. So I found the second half very interesting, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But it wasn't as good, in my opinion, as the first 2 books. So, like, it was fine. I clearly really enjoyed it. 4.5 stars. But there was a couple of things that didn't hit 100% home for me, which is fine. And also, like, the fact that I went in was so terrified. I was so worried about what I was going to think, because like I said, I'd read some situations, and, like, someone said that the end was a cliffhanger. It is, but you also know exactly how it ends. Like, it is a cliffhanger in the sense of, like, you don't actively see on the page how the story ends, but you know how the story ends. And then I was also ruined that, like, she and Robbie breaks up, and so I was like, oh no, that's, like, one of my favorite couples. Like, they got together in the first book. They're, like, this crime-fighting duo. What's gonna happen? Well, she breaks up with him for his own good, and she, like, cuts off ties with her entire family or her family and friends, because she thinks that if the guy that they've chosen, Max Hastings, who was this awful person, I talked about him a little bit earlier, they, like, set him up to take the fall for this murder. And so if it doesn't happen and the jury finds him innocent, which they did for all of the sexual assault and rape charges in the second book, she's like, she doesn't trust the justice system because they let him go. And so she is afraid that that's going to happen again. She doesn't trust the justice system to actually do what they're supposed to do. She goes off to college and she breaks up with Ravi, and now he understands why. He doesn't like it, but he understands why. She kind of cuts off herself from all her friends and her family, finds reasons to stay on campus, and doesn't come home because she's afraid that if something happens and he becomes innocent, then all eyes are going to point back to her. So she like basically breaks off all ties with everybody. And then the book ends with, and then she says like, if that's not what happens, if he is found guilty, then of course, like, if you are still, you know, not with somebody, like, I can get all my friends back and family back, and basically like reconnect with everybody and just blame it on it being a very stressful first year at college. And so she's like, this is the plan, but like we have to break it off so that if something happens, I can take the fall and no one else gets hurt, because Ravi was there with her. They literally did the entire covering up of the body together. So like if she went down and they found anything on Ravi, like he could not be involved. Like she refuses to let him touch the body when they did like moved it around and like all this kind of stuff. So anyway, what happens is like we get to the very end of the book. Great. Then we have a little thing that says 1 year, 7 months and 28 days later. And then it says 3 minutes after the verdict was read at the state of Connecticut versus Mac Hastings. Hey Sarge, remember me. And Sarge is one of the names that Ravi gave Pip. So clearly, I feel like you know, it's very obvious that the only reason he'd be reaching out is if Max Hastings was found guilty. So like, it's not a cliffhanger. You know exactly why he's doing what he's doing. So that comment confuses me. And I didn't like that they broke up, but like I understood why. And then like they got back together, you know, like it's not like you I don't know, like it's very like obvious where this future is going. So all the things that I was really worried about in this book, I didn't have to be worried about. Plus I was talking to my best friend, Lauren. You guys have met her many times here on this channel. And she had read the series a while ago. And I was telling her I was reading it and my fears on this one. And she was like, well, here's why you don't have to be worried about that. And I was like, oh, great. Okay, thank you. So like that kind of got me back into the reading mojo, because I'd read like 100 pages and then I just like stopped. Like I just couldn't find the time. I didn't want to. I did other things instead. And so that kind of kicked me back into high gear as far as reading this again. So I gave it 4.5 stars. It definitely was my favorite. I still think the first one was my favorite. The second one's a pretty close second. And so this one, I think, as far as like the series goes, was a pretty decent ending. And then, like I mentioned, I read the prequel, which was Killjoy. It was super, super short. I think it was like 100 pages or so. And this one takes place before the events of the first book. It's at a murder mystery party that Connor and Jamie are throwing, and it's the main 6 that like were friends in the original book before things happened and they split them all up. So Jamie and Connor are throwing this murder mystery party, and everybody comes and they're a different character and they're like solving mysteries, and they have booklets for themselves, and each time like something happens, he finds like clues around the house, and you see, and they've got like little books that they can write their notes in. And then of course Pip is writing like crazy because she's like, oh, this is just like school, and she like loves school. So we really see the beginning of her kind of getting into solving mysteries and solving crimes. So there's that. And then there's also like I don't know how to explain it. Like the murder mystery happens and she's like, it's actually this person, and she has like all of the clues and everything to lead up to it because she thinks of the person that they have been pushing towards as a red herring. And then Connor, who's the one who's kind of like, not Connor, sorry, Jamie, who's the one who was like in charge of this event. He's got like the master plan, if you will. I think they like bought it from somewhere and didn't make it up, but either way, he's like, no, actually, like the person that you think is a red herring is the one who actually did it. And she's like, that's way too simple, that's way too easy. And he's like, I don't know what to tell you, like that's what the book says. And she goes, it doesn't make sense because of X, Y, and Z. Like, why are all these details a part of it if this is the person who it was in the end? And so like it was really interesting to see how invested she got in the book, and then also to see like a couple of friends who become jerks in the second book and like leave their friend group, basically like where all the red flags were from the beginning, and then seeing all these characters that we have come to know. And like, for example, Mr. Ward, who was like the one who killed Sal in the first book, and he like picks him up, and like you see him kind of have this moment of like freak out because Robbie's walking across the street and he thinks it's Sal. And so because of that, like, we as the reader are like, haha, we know why he freaked out, because he thought it was Sal and he had killed him, so like ghosts and stuff, and then he figures out what it is. But that also sets Pip on the path of like what starts the entire series. So like, it was fun. Was this book needed? No, but it was a really fun kind of story that gives us a little more insight into Pip as a crime mystery solving person, but then also figures out like what sets her on motion, or sets in motion the events of the first book. And so I don't know, it was fun. I enjoyed it. I feel like we got the characters, we got more into the characters, and I'm pretty sure this was written well after, it's definitely written after the first book, but it's written well after maybe the series. I might be wrong on that. So that's why I read it last, but I liked it because it kind of gives you an idea. And like, there are lots of little like hints and Easter eggs for you as the reader if you've read the first book. I liked it. Like, I got it 4 stars. It was not the best thing in the world, but like, it was fun to see like these characters one last time. So with that, I've now finished the series. So considering the fact that the lowest rated book in the series was a 4, I think it's pretty daggum good. So I did it. I read, oh gosh, A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, A Good Girl, Bad Blood, As Good as Dead, and Killjoy, which is what the name of the actual game was called. So maybe one day, like, this is not a series I feel like I need to own, but if I found a copy of all 3 of these like as a package deal for cheap, I might pick them up, at least the first one. I don't know, I just really enjoyed this series and the characters, and I came to love them, and I'm really glad that I read them back to back. I think if I can, that's the best way to read them, and most series actually, now that I'm thinking about it, because like if I put time between some of the books, then I kind of fall out of love with these characters, and I'm glad that I didn't let myself do that. I was able to just binge the entire series. So I'm very excited about that. So that's it. That is the end of this video. I hope you guys enjoyed another hyped book chronicles, if you will. This is what I wanted the series to be, was to find a series that's smaller like this, like a 3 or 4 book series, and just binge it and tell you my thoughts. So I hope you enjoyed, especially all the spoiler thoughts. I kind of went in, I did not do a very good job of talking about the first book, but I kind of assume that anyone who's watching this knows and has read this book series. I hope you enjoyed all my spoilery thoughts. I loved it. That's the moral of the story, is this was a very good series in my opinion. So if you have read this series, let me know your thoughts down below. If you liked one book over the other, if you have opinions about one book over the other, tell me all of your thoughts. I would love to know. Or if there's a series out there that's like short like this, like I don't really want to do more than like 4 books. If there's a series out there that you are curious about my thoughts, that is you would consider a hyped book series, feel free to leave it down below and I'll add it to the list, because I've got quite a few that I'd like to read at some point, but I can always add more. Like, the series can be never ending, honestly. Like, there's just so many book series and books out there. So let me know if there's a series or a single book that you would like my spoilery thoughts on. But if you liked this video, and I very much hope that you did, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe down below if you'd like to be part of this awesome growing family. I've also got all my social media down there, as well as other fun bookish links, so go check all that out, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!